It is just after 5 p.m. on Monday. We have let the dough sit for about 5 hours, 4.5. And it's been a little cold today, so it didn't rise a ton initially, but I put the oven on at a very low temperature. I read online that you can do it for 150 degrees or less, and this oven doesn't go that low, so I turned it on to 170, which was the lowest, shut it off, and then put this in there, took the plastic lid off, put a metal lid on it, all that stuff so that it wouldn't melt. And so that helped it rise. So this is the dough. It's definitely gotten bigger than when we first put it in there. Now the recipe, I usually don't refer to it actually at all, but I'm doing that because of this. And if somebody is trying this out for the first time and they're going through the recipe, it's helpful to have this line up with that. So what you're supposed to do is take this out, put it on a clean counter. I've wiped everything down, washed my hands very thoroughly, and it says stretch it as far as you can without tearing it. I usually just kind of mess with this. I don't even do this part. It says fold it like a business letter. Then what you want to do is cut it in half. You can either use a scale. I usually just eyeball it. Sometimes one loaf is a little smaller than the other. Not a big deal unless that bothers you. It doesn't really cook at a different rate. So it's about cut in half. What you do after that is form it into a loaf. So this one makes round loaves. That's what the recipe calls for, is kind of those artisan circular loaves. And I love those, but I usually use bread for sandwiches or toast or something, and I like mine to be like bread loaves. So I was thinking I would try one the artisan way, but then I do the bread loaf way also. So I'm gonna do one of them as a circle and one as sandwich bread. So this says kind of to like roll it around into a circular loaf. And what I usually do is kind of like grab it, twist it around in a circle, and tuck the edges under. You're trying to make sure that you don't rip the top. So that's pretty smooth. And you can kind of roll the top on the counter sort of to get some smoothness. Make sure there's no air bubbles in there. There's one right there, so I should break those, roll them out. And then, when you've got a loaf that you are pleased with, flip it over, pinch the ends shut, and then you can just flip it back on its, so that the surface is up, smooth it out. It's a nice circle. And you put it on a parchment-lined rimmed baking sheet, and apparently if you're doing the two, you put them right next to each other. You would use a larger baking sheet. This is a small one because I'm only doing the one. And then this one, I just fold. I like to do the palm kneading. I like the feeling of it. So what I usually do, you're still trying to not rip the dough though, so don't completely tear into it. But I usually do the same thing that you do for that loaf, but I make it oblong. So the yeast is or the bacteria in this is really working because there's a ton of bubbles. So, and often when I'm ready to bake it, there will be a huge bubble. I just cut it with a knife or something, deflate it. I feel like that's a better sign than there not being any. So this one you kind of fold oblong. Do the same thing, like flip it over, pinch the edges together so that it doesn't spread out again. Make sure that it's kind of the smoothness that you want. At this point, it's not sticky really at all. The only thing is the oil, so you can kind of do what you want. I don't need any flour because it's not sticking to me. I feel like that's a good loaf. And so I took some veggie oil and put it in this baking pan. Been lining it around. There's actually a little bit extra, and often I would start in one, pour the extra into the next bread pan. This recipe says to put some oil on the top of the loaves, so I thought the extra could just do that. So keep them nice and wet overnight, although you do end up covering them so they don't dry out. So then let's take this, just pop it in there, right side up. This is what it looks like. Nice even loaf. Then what you do is you can take plastic wrap, lay it lightly over these. It says, you know, to let them rest for a little bit. Again, I'm really flexible on that, so I usually just cover them and then put them in the fridge. And then tomorrow morning, take them out to let them rise for a couple hours, and then you put them in the oven to bake. So that is the last step of forming them, and I'm going to cover these and put them in the fridge, and then tomorrow morning I will show you how to bake them.